Welcome to another edition of Conversations Different, a podcast from the Santa Fe New Mexican featuring interesting people and issues of northern New Mexico. This is your host, Inez Russell Gomez, and today we have a serious topic to discuss: how we choose to face the end of our lives and our healthcare decisions. With us is Barak Wolff, who is going to talk about National Healthcare Decision Day, marked on April 16th every year. Welcome, Barak.
Thanks so much, Inez. It's a pleasure to be here and to meet you in person after a good number of years.
That's right. We have discussed op-eds and issues for a long time.
We have, and you've been very generous in putting forward a number, not only mine, but other people who write letters and around these topics of how to live well and how to die well.
Yes, I know. In the United States, we tend to focus on staying alive. And what your organization and people who discuss end-of-life options also focus on is how to optimize the time we have.
Absolutely. You know, one of our bylines is the quality of life at the end of life. And to do that, it's part of living well and aging well is to have that piece organized so that you don't leave a problem for family and loved ones, and so that you don't have that extra stress as you're going through whatever it is, because, as you know, we're mortal beings. Yes. Nobody gets out alive. And so, we get a chance to plan and understand our options.
That's good. So you have a background in public health in New Mexico, rural primary care, emergency medicine, trauma care. You were a public health division director for a long, long time. So that seems different than discussing end-of-life care. How did you go from one to the other?
Well, that's a great question. I did indeed have a wonderful career out here in New Mexico doing all of those pieces, mostly at the Department of Health. And as I moved towards an early retirement, and it was early, I was still a young man at that point, I knew that I would be continuing to use my skills and to work with a lot of the issues I had always worked with. And all the things you mentioned, trauma, EMS, rural primary care, public health, all of those impact the full population. So thinking about end of life in that regard, it means that we're looking at the full spectrum from birth to grave, and it is a population-based approach. And that's what attracted me to it as I sort of aged out of working, very blessed to have that good state retirement, that I wanted to focus on something that would be meaningful for me personally, as well as I thought for the broader community. And that led me to thinking about aging and ultimately end-of-life issues.
Now, when you talk about an advanced care directive, that's not just about what happens should you pull the plug, not pull the plug, or should someone, get a prescription and then I'm going to take it and die right now. It's really about your care throughout a number of things. And I could have a stroke right this minute, and if I didn't have my end-of-life option or my advanced care directive signed and, into my doctor, I could be hooked up to a machine. I mean, things can happen that we don't choose. So first of all, what is an advanced care directive?
Very good. Yeah, absolutely. And please do not have that stroke.
I hope not.
My CPR skills are rusty at best. No, you're absolutely correct. It's a Uniform Healthcare Decisions Act that was passed in New Mexico very early compared to many states, back in 1995 or thereabouts. And it basically gives each of us the right to make our own healthcare decisions and to decide when we want to start care and when we want to stop care. And it allows us to talk about in writing and legally sufficient to think about what we might want in the way of treatment or when we might want treatment to end, et cetera. And importantly, to appoint an agent or a healthcare decision maker or a proxy. There's a lot of different names for the same thing. Someone you trust to represent your interests towards the end of life, and someone who you have confidence in will do what it is you want, rather than sort of what others in the family want or what they may want for you. This is really, that's the essence of this healthcare decision making. These are our choices.
And it gives you control over such things as whether, let's say, you're in a coma, do you want to be fed? And there's different, obviously, kinds of comas. There's one that you might come out of tomorrow, and there's one that you're going to be in for 20 years until your body gives out. So it lets you go through those steps and think about it and talk about it. So you say, I want this sort of care. I don't want to be revived. I mean, people say that all the time. Don't revive me. Well, if I was just having a quick heart attack and you could bring me back in a second, well, of course I'd be revived. But if they know you're brain dead, that's a different story. So how do you distinguish between those levels of care?
Well, that's the beauty of people being able to put in as much homework and thought around this as they care to. There's no rules around this. Some people will say, it's the Lord's will, inshallah. Whatever happens, happens. I don't need to control that. Okay, that's a valid perspective. Others will want to say, well, I want to have some guidance in here in this directive. And others will drill down and go sort of to the what ifs. It really depends on each individual how much detail, knowing that it may or may not come out that way. When we write these, we recommend that you start early in life because you never know what's going to happen.
That's right.
You never know when that bus is going to hit you or you're going to step off the curb or this or that. And we recommend that when people go to college, they do their initial directives and think about these issues, and then revise them over the years, just like you would a will or a trust.
Right, because if you're, let's say, 85 and diagnosed with some sort of potentially fatal cancer, you might want a different treatment at that age than you might if you were 60.
Absolutely, exactly correct. And we sort of recommend, and what I do personally with my wife and I, we've now revisited our advanced directives probably every 3 to 4 years because situations change and our thinking about what we might want changes. We've also changed once or twice who we're going to appoint. We have confidence in each other, but it's not always the spouse that makes a good representative. They have too much emotion going on at times. So you have to be very thoughtful about who you want to represent you. And then there's also the issue of training providers, healthcare providers, to honor these advanced directives. It gets very tough when people are faced with traumatic situations and they're in the emergency room or on the floor in the hospital and things happen that are unanticipated. It's really important to have those directives and have a representative there who can speak on your behalf.
Yeah, no, I have as all of us at our age have lived that. And on that note, we will take a quick break and be back in a moment with Barak Wolff discussing advanced care directives and end-of-life options. This is Conversations Different.
Thanks, Inez. This is Patrick Dorsey, publisher of the Santa Fe New Mexican. We hope you're enjoying this episode of Conversations Different with Inez Russell Gomez. Great local content is only possible with a talented staff dedicated to bringing you the best local content possible. For that staff to do its work, we need your support by subscribing to the Santa Fe New Mexican. If you're already a subscriber, thank you. And if not, there's never been a better time to subscribe. In addition to our home-delivered newspaper that comes with full digital access, we also provide digital-only subscriptions for SantaFeNewMexican.com. We'll also be releasing more online-only audio and video programming moving forward. The Santa Fe New Mexican has been here for nearly 175 years, and we want to continue being your source for local news and information. Visit us at SantaFeNewMexican.com/subscribe or call us at 505-986-3010. Thank you.
It's a new day in New Mexico, and the doors to boundless opportunity are open as tens of thousands of New Mexicans reach higher to pursue a dream, broaden their horizons, and retrain for a better job. With the New Mexico Lottery and Opportunity Scholarships, you could build yourself a better future anywhere in the state. You put in the hard work, we'll help with the costs. For eligibility details, visit reachhighernm.com.
This is Conversations Different, and we're talking to Barak Wolff about National Healthcare Decisions Day, which is marked on April 16th. So what do people need to do who haven't thought about this?
I think one of the first steps is taking a look at what the forms look like, just so that you have an idea. Here in New Mexico, under this Healthcare Decisions Act, that form, it's on our website, and maybe we can give that later, or people can reach me.
And your website, just to be clear, you're with the End of Life Options?
New Mexico.
Okay.
End of Life Options New Mexico is a nonprofit that a number of us who are advocates for medical aid in dying that we'll discuss in a minute or two. We formed this nonprofit to work on these issues, and there are many other people who work on these issues. AARP does. They have a terrific website. So, but New Mexico, each state has its own forms and rules. Ours are very progressive. You don't have to have it notarized. You can use the state form or not.
Well, I know my doctor's at Presbyterian,
Yeah.
and they have it available at our MyPres app. And that was actually when I first found a doctor within the system. They really sent us a note, have you signed your, and not for the end of life stuff. It was really more for what do you want to happen if you're injured and these things happen to you. So they made a real big push to get us to sign those papers.
Yes, Presbyterian particularly has been very progressive in putting this onto their MyChart system, and that gives all their clinicians from the emergency room, anywhere else, access to it. Christus is also very supportive and very involved with advanced care planning. They give classes at times. So here around the north, we do pretty well. Our primary care clinics around the north will know about advanced care planning. And yeah, people should take a look at the forms, and you can go to our website, eolonewmexico.org, End of Life Options New Mexico. Or you can go to AARP or just Google it.
Right.
And New Mexico End of Life forms or advanced directive forms, and it'll pop up.
Yeah.
But more than that, I mean, the forms are the forms, but it's really the conversations that need to happen.
And it's not just with yourself. You have to talk to your spouse or to your children or to your brother or sister, whoever your best friend, whoever you're going to appoint as the guardian of your wishes.
Well, that's a lovely way to say it, guardian of your wishes. But in fact, it is mostly your work to do. Because there are no right answers or wrong answers. That's another one of my premises on all of this. It's what you want, what really matters to you as you think about, the fact that we're all going to die at some point down the road. And yes, certainly the person that you appoint has to be willing to accept this and have those conversations. But it's really important to have them with your entire family and the loved ones that surround you. Because otherwise, conflicts can take place when they shouldn't. People need to appreciate that these are the choices of the individual.
No, I remember so vividly having a heated conversation, shall I say, with my mother, because my father had Alzheimer's. He had a stroke. He was 98 years old.
Wow.
And she wanted him to have a feeding tube in his stomach. And I told her, no, you can't do that. And she's like, yes, I can, because I know that he'll come out of it and it'll be fine. Because even though he was a little foggy, he was one of those people who had dementia who was still very nice. And he always recognized her, even if he forgot me all the time. And I told her, I said, Mama, we can't take it out. Because I knew myself, I could not take it out. That was a step too far for me. So I didn't ever want to put it in to begin with. And she wasn't thinking that far. And I remember how smart the hospital was in not moving quickly with her request until she realized how weak he was.
Neat.
And then we took him home, and he got to die with us at home. And it was really a beautiful thing, not a year of sitting by, because he was very strong, even though he was so old.
Yeah.
And I think about that a lot, because the family can have different wishes.
Absolutely. And that can lead to some terrible conflicts at a very bad time.
Oh, she was mad at me for a long time.
Hopefully she got over
No,
it.
we were very close. But she, as my husband told me, you're not his wife. Can you shut up? And very nicely, but he was right. He was right.
Well, again, we can all get that chance to determine that. But you raise a couple of points in that story that are important. that there are choices to be made about, most people, if they get a cancer or get a serious illness, they're going to start treatment. That's the tendency. And we can treat, and at some point, the treatments aren't going to be effective and the side effects are huge. And so there's some things that we should be doing, like involving a palliative care professional or a team. And Christus has them and Press has them. Palliative care helps focus on the individual and the family and not the specialty medicine so much, but it helps bring those pieces together and helps you think about these decisions and the risk of more treatment. And then ultimately, when people really have exhausted their ability to take more treatments, there's hospice. And that's been a fabulous development. Early hospice is good hospice. And hospice is wraparound comfort care and gives people the support towards the end of life. And many people actually do better on hospice than they do in treatment.
No, my auntie came out of it and lived 3 more years.
Exactly.
It was lovely. I will say that when you're giving your parent their morphine, it is just this horrible responsibility and very scary. So I wish that I had more medical training, for both my parents. But it's what you do, and the beauty of being able to hold their hands with them.
Oh, absolutely.
There's nothing as much of a blessing, I don't think.
When you ask people, how do you think you might like to die? What's a good death for you? Yeah. And in general, a good death is exactly what it is you want. That's my definition. But, essentially, most people say they want to die at home.
Yes.
They want to be surrounded by loved ones, and they don't want to be in pain. Those are the biggies. And we're about 50+% of that now because of hospice, which really is in the home and does so well around these issues. And that's why the obits read the way they do these days.
But when you talk about that, it's not just the moment of death, it's how you get there. Because of what treatments you choose or don't choose,
right,
you can be suffering like crazy the last 3 years.
Well, as you move towards hospice, which again is, I think, more and more happening because it's covered well, it's all paid for, you are basically moving away from treatment. You've made that decision, and you're moving into what we call comfort care. And that's this terrific support of whatever's needed, whether it's a hospital bed on the back porch, so you can see out to the garden, whatever you need. Hospice is capable of providing, but not everything, of course. You need the family, you need support systems. But that helps people transition towards whatever comes next for them.
And with that, we'll be back in a moment with another segment of Conversations Different.
My name is Maria Jose Rodriguez Cadiz, and I am the Executive Director with Solace Sexual Assault Services. Our mission is to prevent sexual violence and empower survivors of sexual violence through restoring dignity, strength, and resiliency. For almost 51 years, Solace has reduced the impact of sexual violence. We do it by focusing on human rights, social justice, hope, and dignity. We believe survivors are experts in their own experiences and acknowledge that empowering them is crucial to their healing. Our advocacy, forensic interviewing, and therapy services are centered to their needs. Our sexual violence prevention programs in schools and community is just as important. Please check our website at findsolace.org. And if in need, you can call our 24/7 hotline, which is 800-721-7273. Your support is crucial to the lives of survivors. Thank you. Gracias.
We are back with Barak Wolff discussing advanced care planning. And now let's get to probably one of the I don't know if it's controversial, but one of the more debated portions of advanced care planning. New Mexico has the Elizabeth Whitefield End of Life Options Act, passed in 2021. And how does that work? What is that?
What that Elizabeth Whitefield End of Life Options Act authorized was a practice called medical aid in dying. And it has many names in different states. It has many names across the world. But in general, it's about assisted dying so that people get some help if they're suffering and if they meet the criteria that are spelled out in our law, which are very stringent. Then they can request that of a willing clinician to write a script for lethal medications. Once they are approved for that, then they can take their time. They can decide to use it that weekend, or they can decide, I've got a grandbaby graduating. I'm not going to do this until after that. So there's still a lot of control that comes into play. And when we look at why do people seek this, partially it's for pain, but even more so, it's to have a measure of control and knowledgeability that you can make this decision when you're ready. So, but you asked what it is, and essentially then a prescription can get written for those who are eligible, have to be an adult, have to be a New Mexico resident, have to have mental capacity, must be able to self-administer the medications, and must have a 6-month prognosis. In other words, just like hospice, anticipation is that you probably don't have much more than 6 months to live. When those criteria are met, and then a clinician who decides to make this part of their practice, and we're very blessed around here in Santa Fe and the north to have good clinicians.
So this is fairly readily accessible for people.
It certainly is. Tougher lift as we get out into the rural areas. But we've now had more than 500 people use this practice in the last, less than 3 years, and from all over the state. And we're very proud of that. We think if someone calls us, we can help them access this program, and then they'll see if they're eligible and if they really want to do it.
Now, one of the things I think that comes into this is the whole religious notion, let's say for people of faith, Roman Catholic, maybe other faiths, who believe that the good Lord is in charge from, conception to death. And when you say a human will take control, I remember the bishop saying, no, the human doesn't have the control. How do you talk to people who might worry about that?
Right. People self-select. This is not for everyone. This is a very small percentage of people will use this. Many more will use hospice. Many more will, stop eating and drinking, perhaps. There are other end-of-life options.
And many will suffer, because they do.
And some people see suffering as a component of living and honor that. And certainly some of the religions very much do. So there's no pressure on anybody. This is all up to an individual to make these decisions for themselves.
So to date, we haven't had any cases of the evil child pretending the parent was sick to kill them, because that was one of the scare stories they would introduce, that people will use it to get rid of unwanted relatives.
No, there's been no adverse kind of experience with this, not only here in New Mexico in 3 years, but across the country in the 11 states that approve it. There's more than 50 years of collective experience. There hasn't been one case that has been adjudicated against the clinician or against the program. Nobody wants that to happen.
This is named after a person. So who was Elizabeth?
Oh, I love that. Elizabeth was a family judge out of Albuquerque. She was revered. She was well-known, and she had a terrible cancer, and she was active. She wanted control. She wasn't that elderly by any means. And she became an advocate as we went to pass our law, and she testified beautifully with oxygen and feeding tube, et cetera. And then the next year, in 2019, she had already passed, and she had a very difficult death because we didn't have this law in place, and we knew her well. So it made sense just to honor her because of her advocacy, and she was well known. She knew the legislators. And it's been quite glorious to think about her all this time.
So it didn't get through right away. This was a hard push.
It was a heavy lift. 2017, we got a vote in the Senate, and we had no idea. We just started, but never in the House. 2019, we got caught up in other issues, and 2021, during the pandemic, with some new senators that came in that year, a little more progressive, we got it through on a good vote. And we have a terrific champion in Debbie Armstrong, who is a representative, and Liz Stefanik from around here, our senator. And we had champions. It was a good debate. It was strong, and we're very blessed to have this as an option. That's all it is.
I was going to say, one of the things about this whole issue is that an ill elderly person, an ill young person does not have to take that option. This is for someone who feels it's their best choice.
Absolutely. And right up to the day, you can change your mind. That's part of advanced care planning. You can always change your mind. Nothing is settled until the time is there for you to make that final decision. And or you lose control, and then your proxy does, your agent makes that decision. No provider has to do it, no hospital has to do it. This is totally an elective, optional kind of capacity. It's an option. That's all it is. It's a choice.
How could people think about it? Because obviously you're old, maybe not even old, maybe you're just really, really sick.
Yeah.
And we all say we don't want to be a burden.
Right.
Are there more places where society could support sick people so that their illness doesn't have to burden the family in the same way? Better palliative care, all of those kinds of things.
Well, absolutely. There's never enough of a good thing. And palliative care and hospice, which is paid for by Medicare and Medicaid, we have a lot going for us, and it's been recent developments. I think we're doing better, but there's always room for improvement. And it starts with the individual taking advantage of their right to designate what they think they would want and stay on top of that through advanced care planning.
And on April 16th, everybody look it up and see what you want to do to control your own health care. And with that, this has been another edition of Conversations Different. Thank you, Barak. It's been really illuminating.
Thank you.
We'll be back next week.